Hello there. £1 billion to save an entire industry. Pathetic. The government should have the words "Let them eat Christmas pud" written on the number 10 announcement podiums, because that's what multi-millionaire Rishi Antoinette might as well say when trying to reassure the hospitality industry while the government of which he is chancellor is utterly destroying it. And these businesses and those who supply it and work within it have been through the ringer these past nearly 2 years. And I wonder how many of them will now have the wherewithal to front up with their taxes when they become due. Will they end up with having the HMRC hound dog set on them too? With punters effectively imposing a lockdown on the UK hospitality sector, the government has stepped in with a rescue package. But will it be enough? With all the fear being generated around Zero Mick and Ron, with calls for another stay-at-home period, or at the very least urgent and worrying messages from government ministers and scientists about limiting who you see over Christmas, the general population has shrunk back into their shells and cancelled many of their festive plans. A sort of self-imposed indoor staycation on the back of the government Plan B and psychological nudging. All with no laws to back it up, but a shutdown nonetheless. This has completely sideswiped the hospitality sector, with meal and entertainment bookings being cancelled across the board. This will affect the pubs and restaurants, their staff and their suppliers, but it will also affect the rest of us when we emerge from our self-imposed cocoons and find there are no pubs, clubs and restaurants left to go to. With reports saying 70% of an already lower than normal trade was being cancelled, right at the time when these businesses should be making the lion's share of their annual income. This led to the Chancellor Rishi Sunak cutting short a trip to California to rush back and put together a rescue package for a hospitality industry stretched to or beyond breaking point by consumers not having the confidence to safely get out and get about this winter. And he's come up with a £1 billion package that starts by giving £6,000 one-off grants distributed by local councils to hospitality venues, with an extra £100 million that can be allocated at council discretion. But the Telegraph says that companies are unlikely to be appeased by this package after seeing a 40% fall in revenue after the Plan B restrictions were brought in. According to Rishi Sunak, we recognise that the spread of the Omicron variant means businesses in the hospitality and leisure sectors are facing huge uncertainty at a crucial time. So we're stepping in with £1 billion of support, including a new grant scheme, the reintroduction of the statutory sick pay rebate scheme, and further funding released through the Culture Recovery Fund. £1 billion. Just compare that to the initial £500 billion immediately thrown at the banking industry in 2008 when the credit crunch struck. Then there's all the billions thrown at track and trace and many very dodgy looking PPE contracts. The Daily Mail says, local authorities will administer the £683 million of hospitality and leisure grants, with 200,000 businesses set to benefit, although the criteria do not seem clear. Another £102 million will go into discretionary funds, again controlled by town halls, and the Emergency Fund for Cultural Organisations will get a £30 million boost. Well, when things are done in a rush, then the criteria will always be unclear. That applied right at the start of the pandemic, but why is it still applying now? But why the rush? I'm no expert, but this scenario seems to fit the process that many viruses go through. Higher transmissibility with corresponding lower virulence. Why didn't the modelling cater for this scenario months ago? Why therefore no plan for it? something that calls into question whether the ministers are asking the modellers for the results they need to achieve a policy, or whether the models are in any way based on science. And just as importantly, where is the modelling for the impact on society and the economy? And £1 billion is not going to even touch the sides here. Cafes, pubs, clubs and restaurants exist and thrive because people, human beings, enjoy the social interaction and meeting friends and family in convivial surroundings. These venues are central to the way we live our lives. It's almost now as if the government has a vendetta against people gathering together. Unless, of course, it's for the chosen few attending G20s, G7s and COP26s, or within the shadowy innards of Downing Street and the number 10 garden. Now, as I understand it, the grants are organised for England only, but the devolved regions will get extra funding through the Barnett formula to disperse as they see fit. Scotland will get £150 million, Wales £50 million and Northern Ireland £25 million. And now we hear that Nicola Sturgeon has basically cancelled Scotland's most looked forward to event, Hogmanay. With Sky News reporting, Sturgeon imposes new restrictions in Scotland from Boxing Day, with no fans in stadiums and Hogmanay cancelled. No football fans in Scottish stadiums after the 27th of December, and table service only in venues with a maximum of 3 households able to mix together. So much for the efficacy of the Scottish Health Pass system then. How will the people of Scotland take to having their big annual New Year's event trashed? But there are fears now that England will be following down this route shortly, with talk about recalling Parliament and Boris on the verge of ordering more restrictions. There's even talk of a January-long lockdown of sorts to help keep people out of the NHS. So having multi-millionaire politicians throwing scraps at struggling pub and restaurant owners is not a good look. This package will need to be increased considerably to have any hope of keeping some businesses going, most of which are very viable concerns in normal times. Now, there are some new rules coming out next year that you might be interested in. But before I get into that, I just want to say a massive thank you to all my Super Thanks Patreon and PayPal supporters, as well as those that do buy a mug with my mug on it. Links in the descriptions box below. You really do help me keep this channel going. Under newly issued rules, most new electric vehicle charging points sold after the 30th of June next year have to comply with a whole raft of legislation. These things are not, it seems, going to be treated like a wall plug socket. The new regs that cover England, Scotland and Wales say that they apply to most charge points which are sold after the 30th of June 2022, although not to certain public charge points or to rapid charge points with a power of at least 50 kilowatts. So I presume that means the one you might get in your house. And one thing is that anyone selling one of these things after that date will have to keep the record of sales for 10 years. So does that mean an extra form every time you buy and sell a house, another form for the conveyancing solicitor to charge you for? Now, these relevant charge points, as they are called, must be smart, be able to charge and discharge. That is, take your car battery through extra cycles if it needs to suck power out of your car for another need. It must also have default off-peak charging times built in, although the user can amend these, as well as default randomised delay times so it won't start charging your car the moment you plug it in. Once again, these can be changed by the user. The new rules also give the authorities the power to enter a non-dwelling premises without a warrant to inspect what they think is a unit being misused, or to enter a dwelling with a warrant to do so. and there's a list of civil sanctions that can be taken against people that don't comply with these rules. Now, as I understand it, the authorities already have powers to do this sort of thing under the Rights of Entry Gas and Electricity Boards Act 1954. So I wonder why extra investigatory powers are required for these car charging points. Now, for some reason or other, certain functions of the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme have been handed over from the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions to the Health Secretary. And part of that is the transfer of all property, rights and liabilities in connection with the transferred functions. The Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme allows for those affected to get up to £120,000 in compensation if the damage is severe enough. It usually only applies to those under 18, except for certain doses, such as those used to combat COVID, where there are no age limitations. And finally, a new rule has just been introduced that modifies statutory sick pay entitlement so that an employee does not have to provide any medical proof for the first 28 days of incapacity instead of the usual 7 days. But this is limited to anyone who goes off work until the 26th of January. With the government, as already discussed, reimbursing small and medium-sized businesses in the hospitality sector for 2 weeks of those payments if they are COVID-related. But is this just another way of encouraging people to stay at home during the worst expected period of winter? So what's your opinion on this hospitality bailout package? Please like and comment below. Please subscribe and like this video, buy a mug and support me on Patreon or PayPal, and thank you for watching.